My name is Ankur, Ankur.
Last name?
Mathur, Mathur.
And what do you do, sir?
I'm a CTO of a marketing technology company called Experiture, and also their head of AI.
Okay, well AI is obviously affecting the heck out of marketing. What kind of AI stuff are you incorporating into those systems?
Yeah, that's been a very interesting journey. So we've put a layer of AI agents around our core platform that is now allowing a language-based interface for all our marketers. We have this concept of an autonomy slider, which allows the marketers to decide how much AI they want in their workflows. And if you slide it all the way to the right, the agents are going to do all your marketing from design to journey orchestration and even analytics and notify you when something interesting happens with your audience.
Spend? Like, is it gonna buy ads for you as well?
So this is mainly email and direct mail, but we also do some SMS, and we haven't quite agentified the advertising side of things. The paid media is still handled by humans, but with AI help. That's sort of still going through that phase. I think a lot of that does require some careful attention, and a lot of like the agentic work is right now focused on the email workflows and direct mail composition and stuff like that.
So are you talking about using are you building your own AI agents based on like a Claude MCP, or are you using ChatGPT? Are you hitting multiple different models? Because I know, for example, you want to write an email. Gemini is a bit better at writing emails than another model, but that could change tomorrow. How are you kind of approaching that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do have a multi-model approach, and we use the best model with the most economically feasible footprint for each type of job or each type of task. So for composition, yes, we would use something like a Claude Sonnet or a GPT-4.5 or a Gemini, and again, we have an interface where you can state your preferences, assign profiles, and different types of budgets and policies to what you want to do, how much you want to spend. But then there are certain heavier cognitive tasks, like analytics is a good example, where you want it to sift through potentially terabytes of data and come up with insight that's going to be interesting, or automatically that's where it blends into classic ML work that I've been doing for almost a decade now, where you can actually do predictive analytics and automatically segment your audience and things like that. So for when you get into that realm, then you want to use heavier models or even private models, because you don't want to send a lot of that core IP type of data out into public models. So we've got a kind of a pretty stratified setup in terms of using LLMs.
Where does the memory live in that case? Like if an individual customer is dumping in all of their here's all the emails I've ever sent, right in this tone, and if you're using multiple models, where does that core bit of content live?
That's where most of the engineering comes in. This context and memory management, I think, is essentially what this harness engineering thing is doing, which is, outside of LLM is a small part of the solution, and managing the memory, being able to retrieve, the right type of context and feed it to the LLM at the right time. That's where all the art and the science comes in, and the engineering is happening. So yeah, it's in databases, vector stores, in even large kind of data lakes. That's where the base all the raw data is, and then it's there's traditional pipelines and things that are purifying that data and processing it, and then storing the signal in a spot where it can be easily retrieved by these agents. But that's kind of the more interesting part of the geeky side of marketing tech.
Yeah, this is also empowering a lot of, just as we're seeing maybe less hiring of engineers, or like old school coders are being replaced by this is replacing old school marketers in some ways. Are you seeing your customers kind of embrace the AI efficiencies?
Yeah, that's where this autonomy slider idea comes in. Our intent is not to replace, but to augment. And I'm sure you hear this a lot, but we really mean it. We've got really long relationships. This is like a 20 plus year a company that's been around for that long, and it has very loyal relationships with our customers. A lot of them are agencies, and print agencies particularly tend to have old school marketers, but they're learning AI through our platform and learning to trust it, to embrace it. And I think that's another kind of rewarding side of my job that I enjoy a lot, because I've seen the AI winter. I've been through a number of hype cycles. I fundamentally believe that after this kind of turmoil, things will stabilize to a point where humans are able to devote their attention to things that actually matter and that bring them joy and satisfaction, and leave a lot of this kind of tactics and execution overhead to the AI. So that's kind of how I approach this.
So in the product work that you're doing, you actually have to interface with just this kind of newspaper style, like old school print media guys, and teach them how to use AI and teach them how to engage with AI. That's not easy, but that's kind of the core product work that happens. What kind of resistance have you faced? And like AI has a terrible problem often from the valley communicating outward, right. But you're essentially having to do that one person at a time as you develop your product.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole spectrum of people, and one has to approach it from different angles. So there are some people who'll just not open that little pop-up that is saying like, hey, here's my agent, Zaira, would you like some help? They're like, no, I just don't, I want to do it my old way. That's fine. Like, maybe one of their colleagues or interns will come in and open it, and then we focus on the people who have some openness to it, and then we ask for their feedback, and we want to make it better, more useful. And I think this is kind of fundamental to AI engineering, is we always gather the feedback automatically, so we're logging everything that is happening when people are abandoning that conversation or when their sentiment turns negative. And processing, we have an entire array of agents in the background doing these back-end type work, like including the data processing I mentioned earlier, but then also this feedback processing and evaluation of how this AI is doing in the real world. I think that's critical to understanding how humans are reacting to it. And so we use some of that insight, and we basically look for champions within these groups and try to get their feedback and get them to teach their colleagues often.
That's interesting. The dark negative way of looking at this, if you're using AI, we know you're using AI. We know how you're using the AI. It's not that we're spying on you, it's just everything is being watched, evaluated, judged for sentiment analysis, all of those things, which I imagine makes the actual project validation much easier to do than it's ever been historically.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think logging and telemetry is an old game. It's been around for a very long time. But I think the ability to sift through all that data and use AI to just even analyze that kind of exhaust of all the interactions is new and very valuable. And again, to clarify, all this is sitting in their private data warehouse or data lake, right? So it's not getting leaked to anyone else. They've already kind of trusted us with that data, and we treat this just the same with SOC 2, HIPAA, all these compliant frameworks, because it's their data, but it's about their usage and not just about their customers.
No, but you can, as you're the one who's sitting on top of all of that stuff, you can draw conclusions from that. Like, because I imagine you can roll out new products much faster than you ever could before. But the difficulty is, how do you keep yourself from blue skying yourself to death? Like, this is something that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. In a framework world of abundance where I can make anything, how are you choosing what to spend time on?
That is such an interesting question, and Josh, I think about this a lot. I actually think that one has to take a big step back and really think about, Kahneman brought this system 1, system 2 way of thinking. System 1 is our kind of instinctive, pattern matching, reflexive thinking, limbic thinking almost, and then system 2 is our slow, deliberate reasoning. And system 2 has been overloaded. With the advent of technology and the pace of technology, we're overwhelmed with this kind of rational, slow thought. And now finally there's an opportunity to delegate some of that to machines and actually look at what should we build to make life better, and what will actually bring the species forward, and not just sort of be worried about the urgent, the tyranny of the urgent, and just thinking about what needs to be fixed to get through the next quarter and meet Wall Street expectations or whatever. It's an opportunity to really look at blue sky, like you say, and there's so much, and that's why I spend part of my time advising startups in various different domains. And it's been really interesting. People are reimagining all kinds of things, from creative design, and there's a company that my friend runs called Uni, that they're actually exactly focused on this. How do you take the creative process and augment it with AI in the most free way possible, so that creativity is harnessed and used in a way that brings joy to the creator, and not kind of captured or replicated by the machine. That's one of them. And then people are looking at the recruiting and the hiring process, and how you you find people and match people in a more authentic way. Of course there's tons of opportunity once there's things in the physical world, which is also moving pretty quickly with robotics, that would really open up so many new avenues, I think, for elder care and even
the palliative care aspect of all of this, whether it's with I thought with palliative care, VR was the only real use case for VR I've actually seen, is if I'm in a nursing home, strap me in as quickly as possible. You talk about hiring, and it's one thing in some of the conversations. How big is your team?
My team is around 50.
Okay, so we're obviously seeing things like Intuit, Facebook, laying off at the same time. Oh, Anthropic is actually profitable, whether or not we believe that profit is, with the given definition of what profit is in that circumstance. But from kind of orgs of your size, mid-tier, mid-level companies, or say Series B companies, they're not firing people. They're not necessarily hiring, but the reason they're not hiring is they don't exactly know yet what they're hiring for. And so that's what I'm kind of trying to understand from I'm an engineering org, I'm a CTO, my productivity is way up. Where do I need more bodies, or what type of person is actually the new type of person, and how do I find that type of person? And for you, you have all the money in the world and you can hire the perfect person to now join said org. Who is that person?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll just touch on the points you made earlier. The reason I think the hiring is slow or kind of ponderous is because I think there's an intent, and at least that's how I see it, to try to reskill people and take your existing people and move them up the value chain, so they're not just coding, testing, and doing and taking orders, but try to get them to think like a product manager. And that's kind of, I think, the answer to your question for me is that I want to hire people who could be product managers but have been engineers, and they, at least in the tech org, and they understand how to build the software, but they're more interested in solving the business problems, and they can think like a businessman and think about a business person, and actually use AI to build it, and who like to free up their time. They're not people who get so caught up in the art of programming that's all they care about. There are people like that too, and I respect them, but I think for businesses right now, the most valuable, at least businesses in the application layer, I should say. There's still people who are building these AI, the core foundation models, who need to be those kind of craftsmen who all they think about is high dimensional math, and the people who are just like into the core engineering problems. There's definitely a place for that, but I think at least in the application development space, you need people who are more user focused.
Which then leads itself to some other interesting transitions that we might hit. Because, like, where is your team? Like, are they domestic? Are they India?
They're distributed. So a lot of it is in New York, some are in South America, and a lot in India.
And so I think what's going to be really interesting, if you look at Atata, if you look at KMC Salute, all of these groups, when you're asking people to think like a business person, you're not just asking them to think like a business person, you're asking them to think like the business person or the user in that specific cultural context. Right. And cultural context matters. Mm-hmm. And so that's not that people in Latin America or the US or Europe or India or the Philippines are any smarter or less smart to be able to approach it, but cultural context is a real thing. And how do we navigate that? And how do these orgs navigate that?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think it's actually important to respect that diversity of thought, approach, and culture, and use that to create products that adapt to it too. And that's again where once you stop thinking in terms of deterministic software, and now you have software that adapts and can respond differently to different types of stimuli. I think the cultural aspect becomes interesting to take into account. So for example, to make it more concrete, if you're building this product for an Indian audience, the agent and the memory and everything should adapt to it, and over time, as it gets more feedback, it starts adapting and behaving a lot different to what a European or an American agent does. So the AI can evolve and learn those characteristics.
And it's something it's fascinating to watch develop. Language is software. Like, how we think is very influenced by the language that we operate in, and that's why some of the Chinese models are able to, from what I've heard, the character count is much more truncated. Like, they're actually able to squeeze more into certain things, but they lose nuance sometimes. I don't know how true that is, but it's just as different programming languages are different languages are different.
That's a really interesting question, and I also need to maybe do a little more research on it, but that makes intuitive sense to me based on my understanding of language models, because if they're trained on a corpus of Mandarin text, the embeddings and the kind of the internal structure of that knowledge that's encoded into the LLM is going to be significantly different, and the associations it makes are going to be different, and it's going to generate a different kind of text, and so I'm sure that's true, and it's a very interesting way of I think there are a lot of regional training that's happening right now, even in India, where all that is going to start emerging, and it's going to be very interesting to see. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to probe this thing from the outside, almost like an organism, because you don't truly, once you get inside it, it's all high dimensional numbers, right? They're just like vectors, and so this doesn't make sense anymore. So you have to sort of go outside, and that's what some companies are starting to do for explainability. I just read this week that the ex CEO of Twitter, he started this company called Parallel Systems, and he's created this product called Index that actually probes the LLM. It trains it on text, from big publishers like The Atlantic and others, and then it creates this explainability layer which tells, this answer was 20% due to this text from Atlantic and 30% from New York Times, and so now it can attribute this answer and assign value and pay them based on it. So it's a whole new way of looking at things.
It's also like a 23andMe of content theft.
Yes, that's a really good way to put it, yeah. So I'm very excited about those approaches.
If and, this is where we'll end up. All of this only matters or is only useful if we can validate outcome. Ultimately, what validation is for different companies, different people, changes. You have to figure out what that is in the beginning. But we're only now at the beginning of having the frameworks to determine the validation of these new tools. Are you confident that all of these AI tools, like the AI that you're implementing in your systems, are you confident that it's going to net out? Like you're going to ROI, you're going to get it is valid, and do you have the framework in place to evaluate that?
Yeah, that's the big burning question for most execs. I feel like in a lot of ways we're in the free trial period of AI, and soon the bills are starting to increase, and the cost of infrastructure and everything. So that's something I personally keep a close eye on. I think it's important to be frugal and use just the right size of model for the right task, and I think there's a lot of work going on in that space too to make these models more efficient. NVIDIA and others are constantly coming up with models that are doing more with less horsepower. I think the framework is in place. It remains right now. I don't think it's net positive or green for most people, but then it's also in a very experimental stage where people are willing to take a little bit of people are investing heavily because the promise is there, and I think that the true promise will come from being able to solve problems that were completely unreachable so far, and that's going to unlock the value, and not operational efficiency, not reducing costs so much. I think it's going to be more about reaching into the next layers of possibility.
Thank you so much.